Welcome to the Public Interest. This is a program produced by the Ministry of the Presidency that allows for the media to interact with the President, who is here with us as always. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Lindy.
Well, the President has a very busy schedule, and so over the past weeks, including several overseas engagements, so over the past weeks we've missed a few programs, but we're back, and on the panel today we have Mr. Leonard Gildarie from the Kaieteur News, and from the National Communications Network, Ms. Janelle Persaud. Nice to have you again, Leonard, and Janelle, I believe this is your debut, so welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Sir, I will start off with the first question. A lot has been said in the public domain about lack of consultations in the coalition with the smaller parties, especially the WPA most recently. But and you'll be able to say that the coalition, the wider coalition, they've met since 2015, haven't they?
Yeah, we have met since the elections, yes. And we have had an engagement with within the APNU. We have had an engagement, and up to the meeting last Saturday, Professor Thomas asked that in our next meeting in July, we continue to work on the recommendations of that engagement. So there's been no sidelining, but we could meet more frequently, but there have been meetings. I have the minutes, I have the agenda of the meeting. So people who claim there have been no meetings are not correct.
A follow-up. Could you say what are the mechanisms for communication between the coalition, on the parties in the APNU, the coalition, its membership, and the government?
Well, we're looking at two levels here. One is the APNU, which contains 5 parties, and the coalition contains 5+1, the AFC. The mechanism is that there's an APNU Executive Council, which all 5 parties belong to, and there is occasionally the meeting of the APNU plus AFC. But since we've gone into government, and since every party in the coalition is represented in the National Assembly, the more normal form of communication is that members of the partnership or the coalition will report back on business that takes place in the cabinet or in the National Assembly. So there is a smooth flow. There's no separate political mechanism other than what I described. But since all of them are represented, they report back to the parties, and the parties give us feedback through the established mechanisms of the National Assembly, which meets as parliamentarians, or the cabinet, which meets. So there has not been a breakdown in communication. The institutions still function.
Leonard?
Mr. President, we've committed ourselves on a parallel deal. However, Exxon appears to have a history of not respecting the outcome of lawsuits. These are from many examples that we would have seen from the news. It has faced court actions from various nations. In the case of Chad, that country is claiming it was cheated out of millions in royalties. With this in mind, what is being put in place to ensure that Guyana does not find itself in a similar situation?
Well, it is a matter of the best practice. We are taking our time. As you know, I've had the benefit of a petroleum advisor who has wide experience and long experience around the world. We have gotten assistance from the Inter-American Development Bank. We are in touch with the Canadians for the establishment of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So our negotiations with ExxonMobil, Repsol, Tullow, all the other companies are being conducted above board, and we're seeking the best advice. We know it's a new field for us, so we don't have experts. I mean, even in the region, we've had discussion with Prime Minister Keith Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago. So we are taking our time and getting the best advice. But I'd like to add that for a corporation the size of Exxon, it would not do itself any good to have deals or negotiations which are subject to public scrutiny, international scrutiny, which are regarded as unfair because it will damage their corporate reputation. So I don't see that happening. I don't know what happened in Chad. I don't know if maybe persons of that from that jurisdiction, were involved in any practices. But I think we can see around the world what happened with Volkswagen or any international corporation that tries to behave in an irregular manner. So it doesn't benefit Guyana. It certainly wouldn't benefit Exxon. But we are getting the best advice on the negotiations, sovereign wealth fund, everything else. And when those negotiations are about to be completed, they'll be put before the cabinet and put before the National Assembly. But we are committed to transparency.
On the issue of advice, do you believe that we have gotten the best deal possible?
Well, it depends on the circumstances under which the company, although we know it's a big oil find, I believe that the recommendations that have been made to cabinet are reasonable.
Yeah. All right. On the issue of the appointment of GCOM chair, could you say whether there was any person on either of the list that would have met the criteria set out by yourself or in the Constitution, and during your engagement, your consultations with the leader of the opposition, in your meetings, have you said, okay, well, these are 2 or 3 persons who would have been considered acceptable, perhaps adding 4 more to that list, so that we can come to a position where the process is not dragged out in selecting a GCOM chair?
It's very tempting, but that would be a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution requires the leader of the opposition to give me a list of 6 persons who are not unacceptable. And if he gives me a list with 5 persons, or 4 or 3, it would be a breach of the Constitution. He has to give me a list of 6 persons. The danger is that some names, and I'm not going to name any names, some names may appear on the list which do not conform to the criteria, and it therefore narrows my choice. I have to have 6 names from whom to choose. And if 5 of them are unqualified or not considered to be fit and proper, I have no choice.
Yeah.
He drives me into picking one person, and I wouldn't be driven into picking one. I need to have a choice of 6. That's what the Constitution calls for. That's what I insist on. Have
you indicated to him those that might be necessarily acceptable, or those that are unacceptable?
He knows who's put on the list.
Is there a specific timeline, sir, that you're looking at by which you'd like to select a chairperson for GCOM? I know you said that you're going to meet with the leader of the opposition and work with him until you have a proper person. But of course, I'm sure there's a timeline because the election is coming up in 2020.
This thing could have been settled in a week, but the 2 lists that have been presented to me were not consistent with the Constitution. After the first list was presented, I was asked for a definition of my criteria. I sent a list of my criteria, and they have not been challenged. My criteria have not been challenged. So when the second list came, it was quite apparent. I think even a blind man could see that there were names on the list which could not conform to the criteria which had been laid down. So that is where we were after the second round, and we've now asked for a 3rd list. And I hope that the 3rd list conforms with the criteria. So I have 6 persons from whom to choose. I'm not going to choose from 1 person.
The leader of the opposition, sorry, last follow-up question, had said that there was a suggestion of a foreigner being appointed. Is that a possibility on your part?
I don't think it is necessary. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's desirable.
Mr. President, there have been criticisms over the appointment of former GDF officials in the key positions in government agencies. How do you respond to claims that this is not a move by the government to militarize the states and job for the boys? For example, GPHC, CHMDA, even at the Ministry of the Presidency with advisors here.
That is a loaded question. Let me look at it in parts. I have nothing to do with the appointment of the GPHC person or the CHP. They are human beings, they're citizens of Guyana, and they applied. I did not ask for them to be appointed. In fact, one of them was kind enough to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notify you before that I'm applying for such and such a post. So these were not my nominees. The second question I'd like to address, Leonard, is that the word militarized does not mean simply the presence of military persons. I don't want to go into definitions now, but it means that it gives the impression that the country is being militarized, which is not true. We're still civil. Have you seen me in uniform over the last 5 years? No. So the country is not being militarized, and the mere appointment of persons who had military service is not a sign of militarization. For example, in my cabinet, there are only 2 persons with previous military experience, but there are 5 lawyers. I'm not legalizing the cabinet simply because there are 5 lawyers. Now, the practice of recruiting former military officers wasn't initiated by the APNU-AFC coalition. Major General Joseph Singh was there before I got in. Major General Attlee was there before I got in. Colonel Chabi Ramsroop was at CDC. Colonel Francis Abraham was at CDC. Colonel Ann McLennan is the Chief Magistrate. Colonel Janelle Persaud. In fact, up to quite recently, they were still serving officers. They're not even retired. So when you look at the list, when you look at the nominal roll of people who were employed by the Jagdeo Ramata regime, you'd see that they have been doing quite a lot of poaching, not only from the veterans of the Defense Force, but also from serving officers of the Defense Force. We carried on the tradition because, as far as I'm concerned, these are citizens of Guyana, and if they are felt to be competent in any particular function, a commission of inquiry or any other, why should they be prevented? Why should I discriminate against persons? So we need to look at all Guyanese and judge them on the basis of merit, not on the basis of some profession that they held in the past. I'm certainly not bent on militarizing the country. I look for best qualified persons. But look back to see what the PPP was doing, including the appointment of Mr. Ronald Gildarie, the former lieutenant who served under me as Minister of Home Affairs.
But these are, and I'm just quoting what are some of the criticisms that we would have been receiving as letters to the editors and so on, and you hear it on the show too. There are some other places too that seems to bring the perception of that, I don't want to use the word militarize again, but it seems to give the impression is that there seems to be flooding of state jobs by former military personnel. I admit that you were saying that it is not by your appointment or direction, but do you see that there could be a perception of that?
I would like to invite those persons who have that perception to look at the qualifications, the suitability of the persons who've been nominated. And if, for example, Brigadier Lewis, if his qualifications are examined, people must decide whether he's a fit and proper person to be CEO of the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. But judge the person on his or her merits.
You recently visited the NOC and you've seen the situation on the ground firsthand. What now is the next step? What are your immediate plans for that facility?
Well, I was quite distressed, not at the physical situation on the ground there, because many members of the public wouldn't go there. But the fact that over 80% of the girls, and they are girls, they're all under 17, had been confined there for wandering. I mean, these are not criminals. And I would like to feel that in the very near future, I could reunite most of them with their families. One day was a mother, and she was crying all the time. Every time she thinks about her child, I mean, she's a girl. She's 16. I don't want to name names, but it is not, having looked at it again, it is not the type of institution to which we should confine young girls. And we need to look again at the so-called offense of wandering, because most of the girls there are for wandering. These are not violent criminals. So those are 2 lessons I brought away. 1, I'm going to reunite some of them with their families. And 2, I'm going to look at the law, so that persons who are caught, we look at the circumstances which drove those girls on the street. There may be a problem at home. There may be may have fallen under the influence of some adult male. But that is what filled me with dismay. And most of the interaction took place in the absence of the staff. The staff was asked to leave the room. So it was a free interaction. Some sang songs, and they spoke from their heart. But these are young people who I would like to see getting back into school, getting jobs, and establishing their own households and their own families. So it's a good experience from that point of view, because things are going to change on the naming.
Are you comfortable with the amount of consultations or research-based policies that are being implemented by your administration, considering that a couple of policies had to, like, say, VAT and education, you have committed to having to reconsidering at a later point after people would have protested. Are you comfortable that your administration is doing enough consultation with people and making decisions based on research?
Yes, we come to decisions in a very methodical and systematic manner. All the decisions really about running the government come out of the cabinet. We meet every single Tuesday. Every month, the wider cabinet, this includes the so-called junior ministers, meet. And in this occasion, next week, we'll be meeting with the permanent secretaries because we're about to go into a budget cycle. Finance is an important consideration. And whenever we speak about most of the protests that you've heard about, that you referred to, have a financial basis. For example, the VAT. We have inherited a very grave financial situation. I don't need to go over the ground. Everybody knows about Skelder and the fiber optic cable, the lawsuits, the amount of money that's been stolen. They need to set up SARO and SARA, SOCO and SARA. But let's not cry over that situation. The point is that we need to ensure that the taxation system is more equitably administered. And the question about VAT on private education is not a failure to communicate, because these are matters which were discussed within the cabinet. And it is a temporary measure, and we will review that for financial year 2018. As far as the sugar industry is concerned, we have had months of consultation. We have commissioned an inquiry. We've actually published a draft paper. The unions have been invited, the opposition have been invited. So consultation is taking place. We know that the sugar workers have been protesting, but the sugar industry is contracting. You cannot sell sugar at that price on the world market. So we have no choice. What we're trying to do is limit the damage by establishing 3 mega estates, one in East Berbice, one in West Berbice, and one in West Demerara. So we're trying to save as many jobs as possible and maintain sugar production, but a high quality sugar, quality of sugar, and it's going to be in a limited market. That is why engagement with the EU is so important, engagement in Britain is so important. So yes, there has been consultation. We are now producing what you can call green papers or white papers on housing, on public infrastructure, on public telecommunications. So, I mean, quite recently there was an expert from Estonia briefing us on public telecommunication. So the public can see a lot more green and white papers coming out, which are discussion papers. These are not bills. They're discussion papers, and when we get the feedback, we will then put a bill and take it to Parliament. Now, next month, in just a few days' time, the budget cycle will start. And people will be invited to come. The opposition and unions and civil society, private sector will come to make the budget presentation. Because we are going to present the budget in November. So there will be a consultative process. And I hope that people bring their objections into that process.
Do you think perhaps then the problem might be articulation of how the policies are articulated? Because sometimes it comes to people as a decision already made. Do you think that might be the problem? Because people talk about hearing about things after they would have
We consult, and the consultative process for the budget will start. And if schools want to make presentations, if scrap iron dealers, scrap metal dealers want to make presentations, if used tire dealers want to make the presentation. So we have not prevented that. In Gaisuku, it's been dragging on. We're spending billions of dollars to bail out Gaisuku. Let the union make presentations as to how it could be saved without bleeding the bank, without breaking the bank, without depriving the other sectors of the economy from billions of dollars every year.
Mr. President, you've completed 2 years in office. This administration has argued that it was elected to make changes and has done exactly that. But the public perception, it seems that not a lot of people are happy with some of these changes. Do you believe that these changes will cost you in 2020?
No, I don't believe that if you speak about the elections which are expected in 2020, I believe that taking the longer view and looking at the country as a whole, you would see there is a deep appreciation of what has happened, the perception of a green state. People have adopted that idea. More and more people are adopting sustainable energy in the banks, in the buildings, in the homes. People approach me and say, my home is completely solar. So people have listened to what I've said. People are proud of their country. People are, I would say from an economic point of view, people are aware that there are difficulties, but I have gone to what I call regional agricultural and commercial exhibitions in Region 3, Region 5, Region 6, Region 10, and people are producing a large volume of commodities from their homes, from the small factories. In the indigenous communities, people are also producing peanut butter, tomatoes, and all sorts. So there is an upwelling of micro-enterprise. And I think once people go around the country, they're going to see that some of the changes which were introduced over the last 2 years are taking root. And sometimes people in the city may not be aware of all those changes. For example, people are very proud of having their own tongues at Lethem and Bartica and Mabaruma. I see, the mayors almost competing with one another to improve their townships. This has never happened before, that you have 3 new tongues in 1 year. So there are lots of changes which have taken place, and I believe people are feeling good. But sometimes you stay in Georgetown and you're not aware of what people are saying in the other areas, in Bartica, in Lethem, in the rural areas. So I think by 2020, people will see that the changes have brought about a better life, a better quality of life.
As a president, as the president, would you not be interested in having a kind of a mini poll to say what is your how well liked you are?
I'm not interested in being. Well, I don't want to say that. The policies which have been implemented by the coalition, I want people to accept the notion that the coalition as a model of inclusionary democracy is good for Guyana. I want people to look at the measures we've introduced, and we will be introducing in business, in public health, in public telecommunications, and judge for themselves. So I would say that, yes, it might be useful, but you can't judge from letters to the editor alone. You need a poll. And I reckon that the local government elections next year would be a barometer of the popularity of the administration. So let's look forward to 2018 local government elections.
All right. A follow-up on the question as it relates to, well, you mentioned a lot of micro-industries evolving. Is there a concurrent national agenda to ensure that those move beyond, so that we add value in a way that we could export and benefit from it as a country in terms of finding cheaper energy to ensure that those industries thrive?
Yes, this is exactly what we're trying to do. Part of the reason why we campaigned so long and hard for local government elections is because it would revitalize the neighborhoods by establishing capital towns in those 3 areas, Mabaruma, Bartica, and Lethem. We want to encourage businesses to use those towns as hubs. Right now, if you're a businessman, let them, you probably have to go to Guyana to register your business. It's crazy. So I would expect that the upwelling of those industries, people should go to those fairs that I have gone to in Region 3, in Region 5, in Region 6, and Region 10, to see the enthusiasm of those producers. They're searching for markets. And, right now many of us are disturbed when you go to the supermarket, you can see plantain chips or Pringles, I don't want to mention trade names, little condiments from other countries, but we are producing those things. There is a large number of mainly women who produce high quality food for parties and so on. So I think we're on the brink of a micro enterprise revolution. And when you go to these fairs, you'll be very proud. People bring out animals, people make furniture, and you can, for jewelry, all sorts of things are happening. So the country is not bankrupt, it's not in a point of economic collapse. There is real vitality out there in the region, real vitality. I'm proud.
Yeah. Speaking of economic collapse, you have, your administration has articulated the green states and other sectors where you're pushing to ensure economic advancement. But there has been criticisms of not having a structured blueprint on economic development. Is that in the pipeline, or are we doing it?
This country has never had the sort of blueprint that you talk about for the better part of 47 years, 45 years. The last so-called blueprint actually came out of Dr. Kenneth King, and it was criticized as being the FCH program. Since then, we have never had a national development plan. There's an NDS, a National Development Strategy, which came out in the 1990s, but it's not a plan. So we don't have a document called the plan, but we do have a body of ideas which form our strategy, and that is embodied in the APNU-AFC manifesto. So it is supportive of micro-industry, but it also depends on attracting foreign investment, particularly in the major extractive industries, in petroleum industry, in mining, forestry, and of course in power. So we're walking on two legs. We're building the micro, and still we're looking at the macro investments.
I have the last question.
Mr. President, your government has been speaking a lot about cost-cutting measures at the state agencies, yet we continue to see public funds being spent without, or examples of funds being spent without us getting the best deal. How do you tell the people we have to be careful of spending when the guidance of the gate, let the gates open?
The gate is not open. We need to ensure that the procurement of goods is guided by a certain vision. I myself would like to see less waste. I would like to see that, in things like what you mentioned, maybe renting of toilets, repairs to schools, that we adopt a green strategy so that if a school is to be built, the water is trapped, solid waste management, solar power. So you don't need these wasteful. I mean, in my own, at State House, we used to rent tents. I'm patron of about 6 organizations, First Lady's patron for another 4 organizations. From time to time, these organizations ask the patron to fund some entertainment. And the rental of tents and chairs is very expensive. We built a banab so that we save money. So we need to inject that level of thinking in all branches of the public service, and that is why I said our next cabinet meeting will include the permanent secretaries and the accounting officers, so that people can understand that sometimes they print polo shirts or T-shirts. We can save money by in everything that we do, cut down on overseas travel, ensure that schools are built. We have problems with Kaieteur, we have problems with the bridge at Hope Canal, but there has to be more careful supervision. These are not errors of our making, but these are errors that we will correct, and that's why we're getting the permanent secretary, we're getting the ministers together to adopt this vision of a more efficient Guyana.
That's all the time we have. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Janelle and thank you viewers for watching.